tertiary education organisations have workplace verifiers that are the tauiras, the trainees, co-worker and assessors that are contracted by the TEO and do not work with the tauira. Others rely on the tauira as co-workers for assessors and verifiers. The former approach arguably minimises conflict of interest. The latter is arguably open to conflict of interest between co-worker, employer and the learner, e.g. friends assessing friends. Thoughts on minimising conflict of interest in workplace verifying and assessment? And I'm going to pass to Betty to start this conversation.
Yeah, sure. I think that perception of conflict of interest will always be present. And realistically, so looking at an organisation as large as Downer, we could never wholeheartedly rely on independent people coming in to verify competency. So we do rely on people in the workforce to do this level of verification. So that's something that just has to happen. For us, interestingly enough, another type of conflict of interest we come across is within our TTM training team. Occasionally our workplace trainers will wear that particular hat. They will also wear the hat of the verifier occasionally, and then they have to put on a separate hat as the assessor. So a lot of the time the conflict isn't outward, but it's quite inward, and it's a conflict of the individual's oneself having to go, at what stage am I verifying? When am I now training? And at what point do I draw the line and assess? And then how do I manage that level of conflict when the individual is potentially either not ready for assessment or they are deemed to be not yet competent, yet I have been delivering the training, I have been undertaking the verification. So at the end of the day, that level of conflict or that perceived conflict will probably always be there, and I don't necessarily think that any level of independence will completely resolve that.
Cool. Kevin, Marcy?
We have in the fire protection space, we actually, because of the compliance-based stuff that goes on in there, you want your fire engineer to be qualified. We actually have a system of, registering the verifier within the workplace. So the assessors, most of the assessors are employed by competents, but to make sure that the person's actually competent, we have a registered verifier in the company who holds the qualification equivalent or higher, who actually is responsible for verifying that learner and making sure that actually they are competent to that level. So that's one area where actually having that registered verifier kind of takes that conflict out. But even then, sometimes it's still not clear when we get assessment guides back that the verifier was assigned in the assessor space, those kind of things, So there is still education to be done, and in an area that I think potentially does still need a little bit more work.
And I suppose there needs to be a level of trust and integrity in the system as well. Like that's an absolute must, because without that, things will come to an absolute halt. And the reality is that's why there is a really robust assessment process. It should show up there.
Yes.
I
think that it's important to acknowledge too that those roles are distinctively different, and they need to, maybe this is something to look into in 25, is looking at how we ensure that those roles are taught really well, so that people understand what they're doing, and also placing that learner first at the front. And that should help if we're focused on what the roles are, placing the learner first, working on the workplace learning culture. Like you talk about that level of integrity as well. It is difficult, and I've seen it. I've seen people wear all 3 hats and sometimes 4 hats. And it is really difficult. I think there's an area we need to develop. Or, devil's advocate, is it the assessment that we need to develop? The assessment process that we need to change, because having to have a verifier, an assessor, a learner, and somebody look over that, somebody to train this. Is it the product that we need to look at? The assessment process that needs refining.
We are looking at
409A training.
Maybe.
We are looking at capstone as a part of our degree level apprenticeship process as well, because recognising that that endpoint assessment might actually be the better way to go in some instances. Perhaps not all, but it is something that we're really wanting to explore. We know the legislation allows for that, it's just that we don't often do it. And so definitely something that we're interested in exploring more. Jackie, any thoughts from you?
Oh, I think just finally, it reminds me of that framework wall where I think about communication skills and giving encouragement and feedback and asking questions. Those are all parts of the wall. Those are all bricks.
Exactly.
And I would say that when you dig deeper into one of those, like communication skills, it's the ability to have those kind of challenging conversations, being explicit, giving instructions the right way. So if you kind of unpick that, you could probably get your answer to making that assessment process easier for people if they had those tools.
I think that wall does apply when you think about it and start, when we start talking about that, a wall applies to many different parts of the learning process, from trainer right through to learner, really.
Great. One final thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Working through the technical glitches. The recording is going to be perfect. And I really appreciate you all being here in person and having these conversations too. It really makes a huge difference to the messaging. So once again, ngā mihi mai o ha, and we'll see you soon.